So let's start off with the biggest upset of the day, and it was to the number one team in the country, the team that beat Georgia in like the game of the century 7 days ago, just lost to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt beating number one Alabama 40-35. And Dalton, you pointed this stat out to me yesterday. That is unbelievable. Diego Pavia, who we'll talk about in just a little bit, now has 3 wins as a starting quarterback for a 21 or more point underdog over the last 2 years. That's more than any quarterback over the last 2 decades right now. So the biggest upset of the entire season, number one Alabama goes down to Vanderbilt. Let's go over the grades real quick, actually, before we get into the stats and everything from this game. So for Vanderbilt, highest grade player was tight end Eli Stowers at a 93.5, safety DeRicky Wright at a 75.2, Randon Fontenette at a 69.8, Cole Spence at a 66.2, Richie Hoskins at a 65, and Diego Pavia at an 86.3 grade in this one. And then on the Alabama side of the football, Tim Keenan III at a 75.1, CJ Dupree at a 74.3, Damani Jackson at a 73.6, Quandarius Robinson at a 70.9, Jeremy Bernard at a 70.3, and Jalen Milroe was the highest graded Alabama Crimson Tide player at a 90.6 grade. So shout out to Brad Spielberger, former PFFer, Vanderbilt grad, massive Commodore fan. He was in attendance for this game. But Dalton, for you, what was the stat that told the story in the biggest upset of the whole season?
So I think it's kind of a simpler one, and it's that Vanderbilt had the ball for 42 minutes and 8 seconds out of the 60 in this game. And this is the perfect example, no matter who the favorite is, who the underdog is, how wide the spread is. If you let a team get comfortable and get in their wheelhouse, especially offensively, they can win the ball game. And that's exactly what happened in this Vandy game. They wanted to run the ball. They ran the ball 54 times in this game, Max. For 166 yards, I'm not going to tell you that's super efficient, but they got enough that they needed to. They milked the clock. They went 12 for 18 on third down, Vanderbilt, and 1 for 1 on fourth down. Not a single 3 and out all day, and 7 of their 9 drives, they ran at least 7 plays. This was about milking the clock with the run game, and Diego Pavia making just play after play after play on third down, deep shots, balls in the flat. Eli Stowers was great. You let a team get comfortable, and you let them play the style of ball that they want to play, especially this Vanderbilt team. And I got to be honest, the sheer number of offensive looks that they give you. We saw this with New Mexico State last year. They had a great season. The only team they really couldn't beat was Liberty. I believe they went into Auburn and won last year. Alabama should have known, obviously, that this was a threat. We saw them play Missouri tough in double overtime. We saw them beat Virginia Tech. This is a different Vanderbilt team. And when they get in that comfort zone and Pavia starts feeling it with the run and the pass games, this is a dangerous team. And you know, I think we'd be looking at them a lot different had they finished off that Missouri game and won that game. We'd be looking, if they had won that Missouri game, we would be looking at Vanderbilt as a playoff contender. Oh, yeah. And I think future teams now especially are going to go, okay, now this is real. This is not a fluke. This is, look, Vanderbilt very much looks like they're at the very least going to make a bowl game, obviously. And if you can beat Alabama, and I know Missouri's fallen on hard times now, but if you can play 2 top 10 teams the way they've played them, they're a threat to anybody, and Pavia's turning around this program.
It's I think a microcosm of the chaotic season we've had in college football is that Vanderbilt all of a sudden is good now. Like nobody would have predicted that, and we'll talk about one player who's a really big part of it, why, in just a little bit. But my stat that tells the story, Dawn, Vanderbilt in this game, 0.806 EPA per pass. Just for reference, the best EPA per pass this year in the entire season is Indiana at a 0.540. And Georgia, last week against Alabama, in the second half alone, had an EPA per pass of 0.412. So almost half of what Vanderbilt had yesterday. And we knew Georgia, obviously, in that second half exploded against Alabama. Vanderbilt was still basically doubling up on them in terms of EPA per pass, even in that second half. This is the worst EPA per pass Alabama's given up since the Arkansas game 3 years ago. And it's the third most Alabama's given up in a game since we started charting college football in 2014. The only other one was Clemson in that 2018 national title game, and Trevor Lawrence just torched them in that one. Alabama in this one had a 49.2 coverage grade. That's 20 points lower than any other game the Crimson Tide have had this year. And it was their worst coverage grade since the loss to Tennessee 2 years ago in that shootout between Hendon Hooker and Bryce Young that they ended up losing. So really, the Alabama secondary that we've been praising a lot, and deservedly so, because they've been playing really well all year, especially last week against Georgia. They made some big plays, but they couldn't do anything to stop Diego Pavia and the Commodore passing attack today. And this is some of the reasons why we entered the year a little skeptical in this Alabama defense and the Alabama secondary, because they were very young. They didn't have a lot of experience in that secondary. And against Vanderbilt, at least, you see why we were so skeptical of them going into the year.
Absolutely. I mean, Vandy just had everything going. Again, run and pass game. You mentioned it, the play action, the motions, the number of different formations. Alabama, they were just lost at times in coverage. I mean, we saw it on all of the biggest plays of the game. They just found it. They just found first downs. Again, I go back to 12 of 18 on third down. That's about your quarterback. That's about your passing game. And there was plenty of times when they were backed up. It's not like they were all 3rd and 1s either. There was 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, 3rd and 10s. They were converting it. And Pavia just keeps us cool, doesn't he? I mean, in big situations against, you're talking about Alabama, and look, they're great up the middle of their defense. I know they're young at corner, but that's still an Alabama defense. And he just time and time again made big throws.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, the most impressive players for us are both New Mexico State transfers that are out of Vanderbilt right now. Let's go off with your one. Who's the most impressive player from this Vanderbilt upset?
I'm going to go with the tight end Eli Stowers. Just an incredible day. 6 catches, all went for first downs, 113 yards, a 93.9 receiving grade. I got to be honest, after watching yesterday, I think he's an NFL tight end. And it's crazy to say that because before last year, he was a quarterback. He was a 4-star quarterback prospect that first was at Texas A&M, transfers to New Mexico State, gets beaten out by Pavia for the starting quarterback job, moves to tight end in like week 3 or 4 of last season, has a really good rest of the year at tight end, was a 99th percentile athlete for us, and that's holding this year at Vanderbilt. I think he's an NFL tight end. I really do. I mean, he's raw, obviously. The route running, he's only played tight end for literally a year, and he just went out there and he was the best player on the field against Alabama. Not only did Pavia make all the throws, but it felt like, especially in the second half, every time they needed a first down, they went to Eli Stowers, and just the amount of strength that he would show on some of those first downs after contact to move the chains. I mean, Stowers was just spectacular. These two guys, and you're getting into the quarterback now, they're turning this program around. They have brought what they brought to New Mexico State now into the SEC, and it's really shocking to see.
I'm going to go with the guy who beat out Eli Stowers for the starting quarterback job last year, and that is Diego Pavia, who had a 91.5 passing grade on the season. The only two above him are Jackson Dart and Cam Ward right now. This guy is like single-handedly turning around Vanderbilt. It is unbelievable. In this game, 92.1 passing grade, 16 for 20, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 2 big-time throws, no turnover-worthy plays, 55 rushing yards as well. And Dalton, this kid, like I said, revives programs. So, before we got to New Mexico State, before we started from New Mexico State, I should say, in the 2 years before Diego Pavia, New Mexico State had a 3-11 record combined in those 2 years. In the 2 years under Diego Pavia, 17-11 records, the same amount of losses, but 14 more wins under Diego Pavia. Vanderbilt last year, 2-10 record without Diego Pavia. This year, they're 3-2 and just beat number 1 Alabama. And they played in overtime with Missouri as well. This kid revives programs. And shout out Alyssa Lang, Trevor's fiance, who was the sideline reporter for this game. She had the best sideline interview we've got, or the best post-game interview we've gotten all year, where she was talking to him, and I loved how he was like thanking God and all that at the beginning, and then right after that he goes, "Vandy, we effing lit." And it was just an amazing moment that unfortunately SEC Network was not able to bleep out because it was obviously live. But that kid, man, just what he did at a program like New Mexico State that was really down in the dumps, turned him around, had the first 10-win season maybe ever, I think, in that program, or at least in a very long time.
Since like 1960 or something, yeah.
And then now Vanderbilt is a legitimate team now to watch in the SEC. So I saw one tweet, and I forgot who tweeted out, so I want to, I hate to not shout them out, but they said Diego Pavia, by going to New Mexico State and by going to Vanderbilt, he's playing college football on like Heisman difficulty, if not more, and he's winning at the same time. So Diego Pavia, I love this kid. He's an absolute gamer. I don't know if he's an NFL quarterback, but if he does get drafted into the NFL, he's going to be the favorite backup quarterback wherever he goes. I love this kid, man. He just revives programs.
There's nobody with more heart and soul, and that's what it takes at two programs like that. Sometimes it's just, those programs that, obviously sometimes are short on talent, like we've seen Vandy in the past. The one thing that a lot of those teams are always missing is a leader, right? And he's a leader. He's got so much heart and soul. He just never, ever quits. I mean, it's just crazy. And honestly, he's kind of used to it. Went into Auburn last year and won when they were not supposed to win that game. I mean, he is just the leader that school needed to start to turn things around, and the job that him and Clark Lee, and they even brought in his old head coach Jerry Kill as an assistant on the staff. I mean, that entire thing that they brought in there, and now that they've collected this talent, I mean, and look, it just shows any program. You find a quarterback, you can turn it around, and Vandy's doing it right now. And I'm just curious where we think also now the Alabama side of this. Where do we stand on Bama now? You just beat Georgia, but now you turn around and lose to Vandy, which is better than most other years losing to Vandy.
Yeah.
But it's still an early loss after just getting a huge win. Where are we at with Alabama?
I mean, Alabama plays South Carolina, which is not an easy. Obviously, South Carolina rough showing this week, but South Carolina at Tennessee. Missouri, LSU, Oklahoma, they have a hard schedule. I do think this is still a playoff team. Don't get me wrong; they're still going to make the college football playoff, but this is not the number one team in the country anymore.
The only thing I'd say they need to figure out real quick here is their defense has given up 67 points in the last 6 quarters.
Yep.
They need to figure this thing out on defense. Jalen Milroe is still great at a 90 in this game. Jalen Milroe, he was great in this game. He just only had the ball for 18 minutes. So that Alabama defense is something to watch going forward, because for the last 6 quarters they have not played good football.
Shout out to producer Ty back there to send us a tweet. The Nashville Fire Department just retrieved the goalpost from the Cumberland River. So they threw that goalpost in the river in Nashville and ended up getting it out. I think they're going to cut it up and save it for to donate to some SEC fans, which would be really, really funny. But yeah, shout out to Vanderbilt. This is an unbelievable result for the Commodores. The biggest win in program history, probably.
First top 5 win ever.
First top 5 winner. Yeah, this is an unbelievable win for the Commodores. Shout out to Brad Spielberger for this, because this is just an amazing result.